a moral difference or do the right thing or elect to recommend that the right thing be done. Without supernatural guidance, we wouldn't know how to do it. In other words, it takes away our most basic essential integrity, or attempts to do so. In other words, yes, there's nothing that doesn't poison or doesn't threaten to poison, so that would be my opening proposition. I have evolved two brief challenges based on this argument, which is, in my view, the core argument of the religious and the believers. And I'll just briefly share them with you. I've tried this now in print, in person, in public, on the radio, on the television, and in innumerable other forums. And I haven't yet had a decent answer, but maybe tonight will be the night I am unhorsed. You have to propose a right action committed or a morally right statement made by a believer that could not have been made or performed or uttered by a non-believer. That's all you have to do. No one's been able to do it yet, but you are welcome to try. If you succeed, then I'll tell you what the prize is, not before. And then there's a corollary challenge, which is this. Can you imagine, can you think of a wicked action undertaken, or a wicked statement made by a believer because of their belief? That would not be considered to not believe, and you've already thought of one of those things. Before you're much older, you'll thought of another wicked thing has been done precisely only because of or an awful statement and the against us. You've already chosen one. Everyone can do that. No one has any difficulty. While you ponder that, I feel I should add that the requirement of the case for decision depends on its being our first, and that's to its credit. But for that reason also our worst attempt at an explanation of our lives, our ethics, our being, our nature. Religion is what we came up with as a matter of philosophy, climate, seismology, cosmology, philosophy, all of these things when we didn't know very much, when we were in our fearful infancy, when we didn't know that we lived on a cooling planet with cracks in its crust that would lead to catastrophic events, when we did not know that diseases were spread by germs rather than by devils or by demons, when we didn't know that our planet was spherical, when we didn't know that it revolved around other heavenly bodies. It comes from the time we knew nothing. It's our first and therefore our worst explanation, and it burdens us. It burdens us to this day with that terrible legacy, with that heritage of ignorance and fear and cruelty and stupidity that is so much celebrated in the holy books that have become themselves such a burden and such a threat in our lives today. And this still shows, to elaborate a little on the challenge I just made about the religion and immorality, wickedness, evil behavior, you will find that the genital mutilation community is almost entirely religious. That the suicide murder community is almost entirely religious. That the decision to teach students stultifying nonsense about creationism instead of evolution, as the biology lesson, is entirely theocratic community, and that though the secular and atheist communities are not free from blemish or wickedness of their own, the crimes that occur in all countries, such as ethnic cleansing, for example, or virulent forms of nationalism and racism, find in religion a tremendous force multiplier when they use a great intensifier of such things. And again, I won't, because I only have the residue of my 7 minutes, I won't bore you with giving the examples. I know I only have one. I'll close then and simply say, in order to believe any of this, you have to believe the following: that our species, 75,000 years old in archaeology, that's one of the first traces, 100,000 years old for sure. Francis Collins and Richard Dawkins will agree on that. Not less than 100, could be as many as 200,000 years, 200 million years old. You have to believe to be religious now that for the first, if we give it 100, isn't that, for the first 95,000 years or so, people are born, die, probably having lived about 20, 25 years. Most of their children will die younger. in horrible ways, probably with their teeth or with diseases they can't give a name. But the struggle goes on, painful, agonizing, and full of fear, full of panic, and ignorance and superstition and disease. But slow progress is made, perhaps, and then relapses. People fight over women, fight over territory, fight over gain, fight just in order to fight. And heaven watches this. Paradise watches this. The Creator watches this for 95,000 years with folded arms. And after about 5,000 years says, it's time to intervene. Preferably by human sacrifice methods. And only in the most backward and primitive and fearful parts of the Middle East. And that will constitute revelation. That is going to be the manifestation of God in human affairs. If you believe that, then you are willing, ladies and gentlemen, to believe absolutely anything. But you believe something that suggests that your Creator is someone both bungling and incompetent, and at the very, very least, callous, inhumanly cold, and indifferent, and at the worst, actively wicked. And I'd say that human progress doesn't pursue that. All the indices of human progress can be measured precisely by the better course by which we have emancipated ourselves from the belief in the totalitarian boss. And that the bulk of that work remains ahead of us, and some of it can be done even this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be a part of this panel. I have had both of these men on my radio show, and I enjoy dialoguing with them a great deal. And I will tonight. I'm debating whether it's moral to react to anything that Christopher said, since he went first and he had nothing to react to what we said. So I will choose the easy way out and both react to what he said and offer some other thoughts. And I will react immediately in this way. He said, and I'm jotting it down quickly enough, if you are prepared to believe that, namely in the days that good God is having the universe created, human beings and so on, then you are prepared to believe absolutely anything. In reality, what I have found in my life is that the people who are most prepared to believe anything idiotic are the secular. In the United States of America and Western Europe, you are far more likely to believe nonsense if you are a secular human than if you are a religious Jew or Christian. The nonsense that religious Jews or Christians may believe in, and even assuming it is nonsense, is quite constricted to a handful of theological premises. But if I had to bet my entire, well, I was going to say my house mortgage, but it's right now, given the housing crisis, that there wouldn't be much to bet. But in any event, if I had to bet everything that I have on the following proposition, that if you took 1,000 American college students who were regular church attenders and 1,000 completely secular college students from the same socioeconomic background and asked them a whole host of questions, it is no doubt in my mind, and no doubt in my mind that Christopher Hitchens would find, that the answers given by the ones who went to church were far more rational. For example, when I went to Columbia University, a bastion of secular thought, I was told as a given that men and women were basically the same. You had to be secular and intellectual to believe such drivel. Religious people knew this was nonsense. Today, I believe that the hysteria over global warming is indeed hysteria. You are far more likely to believe that hysteria if you are secular than if you are religious. G.K. Chesterton was entirely right, entirely, that when people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. The track record of the secular world's belief in idiocy overwhelms the Judeo-Christian world's beliefs in idiocy. And that's the only world that I am defending tonight, and specifically the Jewish one, the Jewish conception of God, but I will take the Judeo-Christian, Western European, and American right now as my model for a person who is far more likely to believe rationally about life and morally about life. I was also taught at Columbia University that the United States and the Soviet Union were morally equivalent. Religious people didn't believe that by and large. The secular believed that. As for the track record of morality, which we'll get to later, the secular make most religious people look like Boy Scouts. The record of secular, of atheistic murder, torture, mass murder, and mass torture dwarfs all the religions in all of history combined. And that's in only 100 years of communism and Nazism. So I don't know where he got that from. If his issue is who's more likely to have rational conclusions about life, he has no good neighbors. He is stuck with a world that when it drops God, it drops wisdom. There are good people who are atheists and there are twits who are religious, but there is no wisdom in the atheist and secular worlds. None. That is why we live in the age of stupidity in America today. The age that does believe that if you give a girl trucks, she will grow up to play with trucks. And if you give a boy dolls, he will grow up to play with dolls. Only the secular believe that. The religious scratch their heads how people could believe such nonsense. Now, as to the larger issue of God's existence. To be an atheist is to believe that everything came from nothing. Since I cannot prove God, and he cannot disprove God, and he cannot prove how anything came about, we now enter the world of only common sense and likelihood. On the issue of common sense and likelihood, I simply ask you if you believe that it is more likely that everything, and I mean everything, came about on its own. That is what Christopher Hitchens and all atheists believe. It all came about on its own. But nothing physical comes from nothing. Nothing does. So it is a leap of faith that absolutely dwarfs my leap of faith, and I acknowledge it's a leap of faith that there is a good God who governs the universe. I fully do. I accept Rabbi Milton Steinberg's great statement, which I will offer as in just a nutshell form. I will paraphrase. The believer in God has to account for one thing, the existence of unjust suffering. The atheist, however, has to account for the existence of everything else. That is so powerful to me as to be inherently persuasive. I fully acknowledge the weakness in the religious belief. I fully acknowledge it. That if I believe there is a God, I have to somehow deal with children with cancer and tsunamis and so on. And every religious person acknowledges that difficulty, or every thinking religious person. But the atheist has to account for everything else. We went from nothing to Bach is a belief that he has. That's rational. We're the ones who make strange, irrational leaps of faith. Not the atheist. Yes, we went from absolutely nothing, or even for that matter, from a rock to Beethoven's Ninth on its own. Okay? If you believe that, I conclude, then you are absolutely prepared to believe anything.
Jody mentioned in the introduction my past as a little bit of a troublemaker in my college days. I remember we used to tell the deans that taking on our conservative campus newspaper was a bit like wrestling with a pig. Not only did it get everyone dirty, but the pig liked it. Now, we, the three of us on this podium, I believe we have a couple of things in common. First of all, I think we are all of, for all our differences, we are of one mind on the subject of Islamic radicalism and terrorism. Since we all are relatively open-minded, we believe in keeping channels of open communication with the Islamic radicals And this open communication, I think, should take the form of live ammunition. Now, I believe in a sense it is not inaccurate to say also that all three of us are in a certain way agnostics. And what I mean by that is that there is a difference between religious belief and rational knowledge. I would say, for example, that I believe in God, but I wouldn't say I believe in my brother. I know the guy. So you believe when you don't know. In that sense, we are all in a field of open inquiry, using the same tools. Inference to the best explanation, history, philosophy, science, and so on. Christopher Hitchens began by posing what is to me a very striking question. He said, isn't it odd that you've got 100,000 years of uneventful history, and then suddenly God appears to jump in the picture? And suddenly, if you will, the religious story gets going. I would submit that even if you took God out of the picture completely, the puzzle remains. If we've been on this planet for 100,000 years as Darwinian primates, having pretty much the same brains that we have now, why is it the case that for 95,000 of those years man accomplished virtually nothing? Not having invented a wheel, not having come up with a cave painting even, and then suddenly 5,000 years ago history gets started. History gets started in a lot of different places. The Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, everybody starts inventing stuff. It does appear as if some sort of a transcendent breath may have grabbed a couple of those Darwinian primates and breathed something we might call a soul into them. This would explain things a lot better, wouldn't it? Now, I'd like to say a little bit about myself. I'd like to say a little bit about God. I'd like to say a little bit about Christianity. I'd like to say a little bit about Jesus. In my own case, I'm a little bit of an oddity. I come from Bombay, India. My family is from a part of India called Goa. I was born Christian. The reason for this is the Portuguese missionaries dropped in on us a few hundred years ago, and they came with the Bible in one hand and a bayonet in the other. They were extremely persuasive. And yet, so I was raised Christian. But this is the point I want to make about the nature of religious belief. A lot of us learn our Christianity, our Judaism, when we are very young. We learn a Christianity adapted to our young mind when we are 5 or 7 or 8 years old. This is what I call crayon Christianity. It's a simplified idea of God as a big man with a Santa Claus beard and so on. Now, this is the Christianity we take to college, where we meet the younger versions of Christopher Hitchens in the form of graduate students, sometimes young professors, and they pelt your religious belief with skepticism. How can you believe this? Miracles, isn't that ridiculous in an age of science and so on? So many of us find that we can't answer those objections at a young age, and we find ourselves pulling away from our faith, from our religious convictions. This is not because those objections cannot be answered. We simply don't know the answers at that point in life. So in some senses, it is only in adult life that I have thought about those same questions and come to a certain adult or mature theism, very different from the beliefs I held when I was 8. And this theism, I think Dennis and I in some ways want to show, can withstand the skeptical assault and meet it on its own ground. I want to say in the short time I have left, I've got to adopt the motto here that King Henry VIII used with one of his wives. He said, I shouldn't keep you too long. So I want to make one, if I may, scientific argument for God's existence. In recent decades, leading scientists have asked a very interesting question. The universe as we know it operates according to some very fixed numerical values. I'm not talking about our planet, the universe as a whole. The gravitational force is so strong. The electromagnetic force is so strong. The strong nuclear force, the so-called electroweak force, and so on and so on. One physicist, Lee Smolin, describes it as God is sitting at a desk with 100 different dials. Every dial set to a very definite and precise number. So the scientists asked this question: what if we were to alter the dials a little bit, fool with them, not a whole lot? What would happen? Stephen Hawking discusses this question in A Brief History of Time, and he notes that if you touch one of the dials and move it, he's talking about the rate of expansion of the universe, move it not 10%, not 1%, but 1 part in 100,000 millionth million, we would have no universe. We would have no life. The entire universe needs to be as big as it is and as old as it is and to have precisely the values that it does, or else we would not be having this conversation. The whole universe appears to be a giant conspiracy to produce, well, us. This argument has put modern atheism completely on the defensive, and I also want to say it is an argument immune to Darwinian attack. So I'm delighted to be here and look forward to a skeptical exchange on these issues. I think at the end of the day, we're all going to be saying, thank God for religion, and specifically, thank God for Christianity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinesh. Each of our speakers will now each take 8 minutes to respond to the other two gentlemen. We'll begin again with Mr. Hitchens.
Wait, I'm so sorry. It says here I have 4 minutes to cross-examine.
Well, you have 4 for each, so you can use them however you like.
I'm supposed to cross-examine. I should do that rather than don't think I've run out of things.
No.
I'm just recovering from the amount of talk on Christianity. I'm just confused. That was just making nice. I don't know. Why don't I do a bit of cross-examination and see how it goes? Someone has to be a timekeeper.
Right here.
And my first is a journalist. And I think I'll begin by asking him if he would care to specify for me the secular roots of anti-Semitism and fascism, the founding movement of totalitarianism. I'm taking you up on your point about secular totalitarianism being as bad as religious.
Given that there was
The original totalitarian movement, the movement that invented the term in the 20th century, fascism, is, if you look at any history, I'll just make this observation, any history of the mid-20th century, take out the word fascism, put in the Catholic right wing, nothing changes, whether it's history of Spain or Croatia or Hungary. I want to know where the secular roots of anti-Semitism and fascism are, in your opinion.
Yeah. Well,
Actually, I'd rather have evidence for change.
sorry, what was that? I didn't hear the last sentence before that. All right, doesn't matter. The question is not fully honest, and not that you're being dishonest, and I'm very careful because I have great respect for so much of what you're saying. But I'll tell you why it's not an honest question. It's because it's somewhat of a non sequitur. There was no secularism until the Philosophes and until the 18th century in Western Europe. So to ask what are the secular roots of a hatred that goes back 3,000 years is to ask what it's like asking what are the secular roots or what are the religious roots of Henry Ford's Model T. I mean, one has nothing to do with the other. However, today...
You did say that this was a secular movement.
I did say what was a secular
You said that fascism and Nazism were secular.
Yes, they are indeed.
Well,
I said that. I said communism and Nazism. I said communism and Nazism.
Trying to get you to acknowledge the utter falsity of what you said.
The what of what I said? It's a problem with these sounds out
I
here.
also in getting you to say that it is utterly false. The origins of the organizing principle of that movement, Jew hating, are not secular.
Yes, you're absolutely right. They are religious because
they are in the religion that half the people in this room just applaud.
Well, then give me the secular roots of the Ten Commandments. It's just as silly a question. There is no secular roots when there is no secularism. But today in America, almost all the anti-Semitism comes from the secular left. So it's a very poor argument on your where there is religion in America and there is secularism. The anti-Semitism is overwhelmingly like at UC Irvine next week from the secular left.
I'm just saying. I think that now you may have perhaps exhausted the extreme tolerance for other people's religions, but the Catholic anti-Semitism just discussed that. If anyone who doesn't know that anti-Semitism is being done by this book, I think that's a crime. Pretty well understood. The revival of the protocols for what is designed from Hamas works.
Yes, of course it
Comes
does.
from
But
another
they're not in the United States.
Another
They're in the Middle
monotheism
East.
that directly claims kinship with Christianity and Judaism. The origins of anti-Semitism are entirely in other monotheisms. I mean, if anyone doesn't know that,
Yes, they
if
are.
You can
They
find me
are.
a single, if you find me a single text of the secular left that licenses anti-Semitism, I should be very surprised, and I challenge you to do so.
Well, sure, I'll be
But
happy.
I would invite you to stop exculpating.
I'm not
at the very least, to
exculpating-
stop making excuses for the actual practitioners of anti-Semitism, the Catholic and Islamic right wing.
I wrote a
About
book.
whom you
I wrote a
haven't
book
had
on
the word-
anti.
about whom you haven't the
My
word
book on
said.
anti-Semitism is available, and it
Haven't the
has an
word
entire
said.
chapter on the Christian roots and the Muslim roots of anti-Semitism.
Well, why did you mention that instead of slandering secularists who are not guilty of this charge?
Why did I mention what? It's terrible.
Why did you not mention the religious roots of this filthy prejudice instead of slandering secularists who aren't guilty of it? Why waste your time and hours?
First of all, I didn't even mention anti-Semitism either. So why? What? You can't ask me why I didn't mention what you're raising.
I appeal to you, ladies and gentlemen. That was a very vague and serious one. Very disappointing. I think 4 minutes cross-examination. Now for Dinesh, do I get to go to
Yes,
Dinesh now?
please.
Dinesh will perhaps not be so evasive when I ask him. He kept saying he was a Christian. What he meant to say was he was a Roman Catholic. There are lots of ways to take the nonsensical statements made by Mr. Prager earlier about, for example, gender equality or global warming. These are the sort of things you get from Quakers and Unitarians and Methodists and Anglicans, as much as you do from secularists. There are many, many ways to be a Christian, but the Pope says there's only one true way of being one. Ratzinger says there's only one true church, only one church that's divinely inspired, has real authority, and it's the Roman Catholic Church. Is your view also the view of His Holiness?
I'm not sure. Well, I
What a
say this
disappointing
because,
reply.
well, I'll be honest with you. I think you're jumping a little bit here into describing my views, which I've written about quite openly. I certainly am raised Catholic. I've drawn in my work on the intellectual tradition. On the other hand, I'm married to an evangelical Christian, and in my work and in my life, I try to combine elements of the Catholic intellectual tradition with some of the experiential, faith-based relationship with God elements that I draw from evangelical Christianity. So quite openly I identify myself with what C.S. Lewis called mere Christianity. That's not an evasion. That's where I am.
But he does say very much exactly what I say I'm an atheist, you pretty much tell that it's disappointing every time I ask for a religion nowadays, they're shocked at some clerical cafeteria. I like this bit, I don't like that bit. To be a Roman Catholic is supposed to mean that you say that all other forms of religion are good.
First of all, I think that's flatly untrue, Christopher. Not only
here's what the Catholic Church actually says. I'm saying this for this reason. There's a lot of self-documentism in the art, and there's a lot of self-documentism in the audience. I just feel a few tough distinctions are worth making.
Well, let's make them.
People really take their church seriously, particularly another church. It's a pity. You're wasting your time. Your religion is justice. It's not going to get rid of that. It's not going to achieve it. It's not going to save it. There's only one way to do it. Now that surely has to be counted also as among the beliefs of the religion.
Well, first of all,
Wouldn't you say yes to that?
well, you made a number of statements. Look, it is in some senses true that all religions, and by the way, this is no less true of atheism or secularism, claim an exclusive claim to truth. If atheism is true, no religion can possibly be true. So atheism in that sense is just as parochial in asserting the falsity of every competing faith. Second, Christianity is probably the only religion that declares another religion to be completely true, and that is Judaism. Christianity is built, you might say, on the foundation of Judaism and intends to incorporate it unedited, the whole thing. Third, even within Catholicism, there is something that actually ranks higher than the Pope and higher than all the encyclicals, and that is the inner voice of conscience. This is asserted in numerous ways, but it is a doctrinal teaching that conscience, the little referee, what Adam Smith called the impartial spectator inside of us, that is the ultimate authority.
Not wanting to be accused of soft moderating.
I'm sorry. Could you speak a bit louder?
Wouldn't rebuttal be what then?
Well, I think we should keep the format.
Yeah, then we could do
Now-
it. I agree that just allowing rebuttal for a longer time afterwards, rather than crossing. Yes, it reminds me too much of lawyers than anything.
Or congressional hearing.
Is it my turn? All right, so Christopher, I just have a number of questions that would interest me to get your answer to. I fully acknowledge, and so did Dinesh D'Souza at the very outset, that every thinking believer has doubts. Do you ever doubt your atheism?
Well, the practice is secular practice is based on.
So you're not answering my question. Do you ever doubt atheism? I sometimes doubt God's existence. Do you ever doubt God's non-existence?
No.
Okay. That is exactly a perfect example.
I mean, I try.
It is a perfect...
I try, but I can't
yes,
succeed.
all right.
I do my best. I mean,
Well, you don't
I give
try
it,
hard enough.
I give it a try, but
Okay. All right.
it's not possible to.
I know. Well, that is... Look, I appreciate your honesty because...
I think I'm here myself because of the laws of biology,
Okay.
and not because of a divine plan. I just haven't got the arrogance to claim that I'm here because God has a plan.
On the contrary, you have much more arrogance because of your certitude is greater than ours. We have self-doubt, you do not. You heard that, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, that is
Not
fact.
make me concede any such thing.
No, you said you... I'm sorry. I asked you, do you ever doubt...
I said I try.
Yes,
I can't.
but, right. So I don't care whether you try or not. The fact is that you never doubt your atheism.
cannot
We
come
doubt
up-
our
I
religiosity.
cannot come up with...
There is a far more inquiring mind among the thoughtful religious than among, and I will include you, the thoughtful atheists. You are far more dogmatic than we are.
I can't find any merit in, since you're asking me again, I can find no merit in any theistic explanation of my presence here or yours.
Yes, that's a separate
I
question.
have tried.
Whether you find, I understand, whether you
I
find
owe-
merit or
I
not.
owe you my
fine.
best reply.
Okay, so we answered that question. We acknowledge doubts, you acknowledge no doubts. Fine,
No,
fair
no,
enough. Next
no,
question.
No, that's not what I said.
That is what you said. It's on tape
No,
and
it isn't.
video.
It is not what I said.
It is what you said.
No, it
You
isn't.
said you try, but you fail.
No, you've
you
been
said it
boring
4
as well
times.
as good. You've been boring as well as good. And dishonest.
Well, all right. Look, Pete,
Look to your,
you
look
will
to your
all
immortal,
purchase the
look to your
CD,
immortal,
and you
look to
will.
your immortal self.
You said you don't doubt your atheism. All right, we'll leave that point. If you said you did, the audience will judge. Next.
Statement that something is doubtless is not a statement of judgment. Okay, I don't doubt
Yeah,
the rotundity of
it's
the
a statement
globe.
of a
either.
dogmatic. It's a dogmatic
I don't
outlook.
doubt it.
Right. Okay. We acknowledge more intellectual doubts. That's all I wanted to say because there is an all-pervasive outlook today that it is the atheist who is the open-minded and it is the religious believer who is the closed-minded. And you just heard an example, in my opinion. If you reject it, you reject it. But in my opinion, of a greater open-mindedness to self-doubt and self-inquiry among most religious people than among the atheists.
I don't doubt the fear of natural selection either.
Okay, fine.
That's
All right, fine. I understand. I don't
Sorry.
doubt that the sun rises in the east. So
Very
you have
good.
the same
Now-
certitude
now
about that.
finally.
No, now we're
Finally.
finally up. Okay. Now, you asked about, can we come up with any good actions that were done because of religion that wouldn't be done by secularists, and one cannot, and if one did, you would give them a prize to be announced later. I will ask for that prize in a moment. And you said on the